Margaret Hayes stood in the driveway of her modest home, clutching the notarized documents against her chest. At 72, she'd learned that life could surprise you, even when you thought all the chapters had been written. Her brother Vincent had passed away 3 months ago. Childless and recently divorced, he'd left everything to Margaret: his sprawling Victorian house, his investments, and a bank account that made her catch her breath when the lawyer read the number aloud. Over $2 million. She'd wept, not just from grief, but from gratitude. Vincent had always been the successful one, the businessman who'd made his fortune in real estate. Margaret had been a schoolteacher, raising her son Daniel on her own after her husband left when Daniel was just 5. Now, finally, she could help Daniel and his wife Rachel. They'd struggled with Rachel's medical bills, Daniel's modest salary barely covering their expenses. Margaret imagined their faces when she told them she'd pay off their mortgage, set up college funds for future grandchildren, even help Daniel start that woodworking business he'd always dreamed about. The autumn air carried the scent of falling leaves as Margaret walked up the path to her son's house. She'd called ahead, told them she had wonderful news to share. Through the kitchen window, she could see movement inside, but as she drew closer, she heard voices. Rachel's voice, sharp and impatient. "Did you get her to sign anything yet?" Margaret froze, her hand on the garden gate. "Not yet," Daniel replied, his tone weary. "Mom's not stupid. She'll want to read everything carefully. We don't have time for that. The investment opportunity closes next week. We need access to that money now." Margaret's heart began to pound. She stepped back, hidden behind the hedgerow. I know, Daniel said. "I'll tell her we need it for Rachel's treatments. She'll give us anything for that." Rachel laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "Your mother is so gullible. Poor Rachel, so sick." Meanwhile, I'd been planning our exit strategy for months. "What do you mean, exit strategy?" "Oh, Daniel, did you really think we'd stay in this boring town once we have the money? I've already looked at properties in Costa Rica. We can live like royalty there on even half of what your uncle left." There was a long silence. Then Daniel spoke, his voice uncertain. "But, Mom, we can't just take her money and leave. Watch us," Rachel said coldly. "Your mother has been a burden to you your whole life. This is your chance to finally be free." Margaret's knees felt weak. She gripped the fence post, steadying herself. The son she'd raised, the boy she'd worked double shifts for, read bedtime stories to, nurse through illnesses and heartbreaks, he was planning to betray her. But what pierced her heart most deeply was that he didn't disagree. He didn't defend her. He just asked, "How long do you think we have before she gets suspicious?" Margaret turned and walked back to her car on trembling legs. She sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Then she took out her phone and made a call. "Hello, Richard. It's Margaret Hayes. I need to make some changes to my estate plan. Can you see me tomorrow morning?" That night, Margaret sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and her brother's leather journal. She'd found it among his belongings. In Vincent's careful handwriting, she read about his own heartbreak, how his ex-wife had married him for money, how the divorce had nearly destroyed him, how grateful he'd been to have a sister who loved him for who he was, not what he had. On the last page, Vincent had written, "Margaret, you taught me that wealth isn't about money. It's about integrity, kindness, and knowing who truly matters. Remember that, always." Margaret traced the words with her finger and smiled through her tears. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret met with Richard extensively. She donated most of Vincent's estate to a foundation for teachers' children who'd lost a parent. She set up a trust for Daniel that would provide modest support if he ever found himself truly in need, with strict conditions about honesty and good character that a review board would evaluate. The Victorian house she donated to become a community center. The remaining funds she split between several charities Vincent had loved. For herself, she kept enough to live comfortably, travel a bit, and maintain her independence. When Daniel and Rachel came to visit 2 weeks later with papers for Margaret to sign giving them power of attorney over her finances, Margaret served them tea in her good china. "I've been thinking," she said gently, watching their eager faces, about how to handle Vincent's generosity. "We've been thinking about that too, Daniel said quickly. In fact, Margaret held up her hand. "I've already made my decisions. The money is going where it can do the most good. I've kept enough for myself, of course." Rachel's face went rigid. "What do you mean, going where it can do the most good?" "Charitable foundations, mostly. Organizations Vincent believed in. He'd be proud." Daniel stood abruptly. "Mom, you can't just give away your inheritance. We had plans." "I know you did," Margaret said softly. "I heard you discussing them 2 weeks ago, beside your kitchen window." The color drained from Daniel's face. Rachel's expression turned venomous. "You can't cut me out," Daniel said desperately. "I'm your son, and you'll always be my son. I've set up a trust that will help you if you ever face genuine hardship. But real wealth isn't money. It's integrity. It's loyalty. It's love that doesn't come with conditions." Margaret stood and walked to the window, looking out at her garden. "Your father left us when you were small, and I raised you alone. I thought I'd taught you about kindness and honor. I realize now I failed somewhere." "Mom," Daniel's voice cracked. She turned to face them, tears in her eyes, but strength in her voice. "I forgive you, both of you, but I won't enable you. You'll have to build your life on your own efforts, your own character. That's the real inheritance I should have given you all along." Rachel grabbed her purse. "We're leaving, and don't expect us to come back." "That's your choice," Margaret said. "But know that my door will always be open if you come back with honesty in your hearts." They left in anger, slamming the door. Margaret sat down in her favorite chair and picked up Vincent's journal again. She felt lighter than she had in weeks. The money was gone to worthy causes. The betrayal still hurt, but it had taught her something invaluable. She'd been so focused on giving Daniel everything that she'd forgotten to teach him what truly mattered. 3 years passed. Margaret traveled to Italy, volunteered at the community center in Vincent's house, and spent time with true friends. The foundation she'd created had helped dozens of children pursue their education. Then, one autumn evening, there was a knock at her door. Daniel stood there, alone. His hair was graying at the temples. His eyes were red. "Mom," he whispered, "I've been such a fool." Margaret looked at her son, really looked at him. She saw genuine remorse in his face, the weight of regret in his shoulders. "Come in," she said quietly. "I'll make tea." They sat in the kitchen where Margaret had once taught him to bake cookies, where they'd done homework together, where she'd bandaged his scraped knees and listened to his childhood dreams. "Rachel left me," Daniel said. "When the money didn't come, when the schemes didn't work, she found someone else with better prospects." He laughed bitterly. "I deserved it." "What happened, Daniel?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I got lost, Mom. I started measuring my worth by money, by success. I forgot who I was, who you raised me to be." Tears streamed down his face. "I betrayed the person who loved me most in this world. I don't expect forgiveness. I needed you to know I understand what I did, how wrong I was." Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. "I forgave you 3 years ago, Daniel. I've been waiting for you to forgive yourself." They talked through the night, about mistakes and redemption, about the difference between wanting things and needing them, about how love isn't something you inherit, it's something you choose every day. Daniel didn't ask for money. He told her about his job as a carpenter, about the satisfaction of building things with his hands, about learning to live simply. "I'm proud of you," Margaret said as dawn broke. "Not for being successful, for being honest." Daniel stayed for breakfast. As he prepared to leave, he hugged his mother tightly. "Thank you for teaching me what real wealth is, even if I had to lose everything to understand it." Margaret watched him drive away, her heart full. Vincent had been right. Wealth wasn't about money. It was about holding onto your principles, about offering love without conditions, about knowing that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is allowing them to find their own way back. She made herself another cup of tea and sat in her garden, surrounded by the autumn colors, grateful for a life rich in the things that mattered most: integrity, forgiveness, and a love that could survive even betrayal and find its way home.